Hello. So last week I did an unboxing of Nemesis and some of the expansions. I said this week I would try to do a how to play an example turn, so that's what I'm going to do just of the base game because that's all I've played. I played one game of it yesterday, 3 players, solo. I lost. But anyway, I'm going to go through setup, how to play, and then we'll do a couple of example turns. So let's get started. Alright, first thing you do is put the board on the table. Use the side with the red arrows up here in the corner. That's the basic side. It's a double-sided board, so I guess the other side is a little more complex. Anyway, the rules said start with the side with those arrows, so that's what we're going to do. Alright, then you'll take all these tiles marked room 2, shuffle them up, and then you're going to put them on all the spots on the board that have the 2 marked there. So let me get that done, I'll be back. Alright, so I've got the room 2 tiles laid down. There are extras. Whatever you don't end up putting on the board, you put back in the box without looking at them. So with the room 2 tiles, you never know exactly which ones you're going to have during this game. Alright, then you'll do a similar thing with the tiles marked room 1. Shuffle those up and then place them in all the spots on the board that are marked for room 1. So let me get that done and I'll be back. So you will end up using all the room 1 tiles, so they'll be on the board, the ship, every game. They'll just be in a different location. You won't know exactly what rooms are going to be where each game. Next, you'll take these exploration tokens, shuffle them up, and you'll place one face down on each room tile on the board. Like so. So let me get that done and I'll be back. So again, you won't use all the exploration tokens. You'll have a few left over which you'll put back in the box without looking at them. So you don't always know exactly what tokens are going to be placed out on the board each game. Next, you'll take these deck of coordinates cards, shuffle them up, and place one randomly on its spot on the board without looking at it, which is here. See, it's got a matching image, and the rest of the coordinates cards will just go back in the box unused for this game. Next, you'll take one status marker. That's these clear kind of bead tokens or whatever. Anyway, and you're going to put that on the destination track. That's the track here in the cockpit of the ship, and you're going to put that on the B space of the destination track. Next, you'll take a number of escape pod tokens. That's these, depending on the number of players. It says randomly chosen, so maybe there's a reason you would randomly choose them, which I'm not sure of just from the one game I've played. But anyway, for 3 players, you take 3 escape pods. So I don't know. I'm going to randomly choose 1, 2, and 3 and put 4 back in the box. Then you take the lowest numbered escape pod token, which is going to be number 1 for me, and you put it in section A, which is right here, with the locked side. Then you take your next lowest, which for me is going to be 2, and put it in section B, and continue alternating like that. For me, that's just 1 more. So I'll put number 3 up here in section A again with the locked side up. Alright, then you're going to take these engine markers, starting with the ones marked 1. They each have a working and damaged side. So you're going to start with, there we got 1, 2, and 3. You're going to start with 1. You're going to shuffle them randomly. Hopefully you don't know which one is. Uh-oh, I saw that one now. So maybe I should do it with my eyes closed. But anyway, you're going to shuffle them. And then without looking at them, you're going to put them on the engine space of the ship. So that's engine space 1. The top tile is the true status of the engine, so it may be working or not working. Nobody's supposed to know. So you're probably supposed to shuffle these under the table or something so you don't... Oh, no. Anyway, let me shuffle these up and put them on their spaces on the board. Alright, so I got my engine tiles laid out on the board. The top one is the actual true status of the engine. At least at the start of the game, players later can change that. But they don't know, nobody knows what the true status is at the beginning of the game. Alright, then you're going to take the intruder board and place it somewhere next to the game board and place 5 eggs in it. Guess I need one more. And then 3 random intruder weakness cards. So that's these. I'll shuffle them up and deal 1 on each of these spaces. Alright, so I've got my intruder board with 3 intruder weaknesses and 5 eggs in the nest. Alright, next you're going to take your intruder bag, which in my opinion is a little too small. I can't fit my hand in there very good. But anyway, you're going to take, from these tokens, you're going to take 1 blank token, 4 randomly chosen larvae tokens or larva tokens. There's 4. 1 creeper token, these are the creepers. 1 queen token, there's only 1. And then 3 adults. I'll just random 1, 2, 3. And you can look at this intruder board to see which symbol is what. The larva is that one, creeper, adult, breeder, and queen. But we don't start with any breeders in the intruder bag. Alright, so here's the tokens we're going to put in the intruder bag. And then you just mix them up. I'll mix them up with my hand, but you can see that's kind of small to get your hand in. I'll probably replace that with a bigger bag. These other tokens you just put near the side of the board, the remaining ones. Oops, I forgot you put 1. You also put 1 adult for each player playing the game. I'm going to play a 3-player game, so I got to put 3 additional adults in the bag. Then you'll place these intruder carcass tokens next to the board also. Alright, next you'll shuffle and place next to the boards the following decks: the green item deck, yellow item deck, red item deck, the event deck, the Intruder Attack deck, the Contamination deck, and the Serious Wound deck. Then you'll also take the crafted item deck, which you don't need to shuffle, and place it next to where you place your item cards. Now you want to kind of leave space where you can put discards. On this small table of mine, I don't really have a lot of space for discards, but if you have a bigger table, you need to do that. Then you want to take your scanner and place it somewhere near the Contamination deck. Then you'll want to put your fire markers, your malfunction markers, your noise markers, your ammo and injury markers, and your status markers somewhere next to the board. Then you'll also put your door tokens, your red character corpse tokens, your noise dice, your combat dice, and your first player token somewhere nearby. You'll place 1 status marker on the green space of the time track on the board. Then you take as many help cards as there are players, so since I'm playing a 3-player game, you'd take 3. Then you shuffle them up and randomly deal 1 to each player. I'm going to just do what I normally always do. My first player will be here, my second player will be here, and third player will be here. But normally you shuffle those up and deal them out randomly. Then each player will get one card holder that matches their player number they got on their help card. So number 1 to this player, number 2 to this player, and number 3 to this player. Then you'll take the objective decks. There's 2 objective decks, one for corporate and one for personal. And you'll go through and remove any cards that are for a number of players that are not in the game. So like this 5+, since I'm only playing 3, the 5+ and 4+ will come out of the game. So let me go through both these and remove those for a number of players that aren't going to be in the game. Alright, then you'll shuffle up each of these decks and you'll deal 1 card of each deck, 1 personal and 1 corporate objective to each player, and they'll keep that information hidden from the other players. So let me do that. Alright, so normally you'd keep these hidden from the other players. Since I'm obviously playing by myself, no need to do that. So this kind of has your objective for the game for you to win. So the corporate objective for player 1 is player 3's character cannot survive, because bad things are bound to happen on long, cold, boring space routes. The wounds sometimes fester for too long. And his personal objective is finish the game in an escape pod, and you must have at least 7 items. Quest items count only if they are active. So we haven't talked about quest items yet, but so those, each player will have their own corporate and personal goal. And I'll just flip those up for each of my players. Kind of running out of room. Alright, next, player 1 will take the character draft deck and he'll shuffle them up and randomly choose 2. And from those he'll choose 1 to play as the character he wants to play. So we'll say he's going to choose the captain, so he will put the other one back in the deck. Now player 2 will shuffle these and choose 2. So we'll just say he got soldier and mechanic. We'll say he's going to choose soldier. Now then he shuffles these back, and then we come to player 3. He shuffles and chooses 2. He got mechanic and scientist, and we'll say he's going to choose the mechanic. Each player will then take the player board of the character that they chose. The draft cards can go back in the box, so we got captain, mechanic, and soldier player boards. Each player will take the corresponding figure, and it's shown on their player board what it looks like. So, and they'll put that in the I think it's called the hibernation chamber, more or less. So the mechanic figure and the soldier figure. I think I'll eventually paint these. I hate playing with gray plastic, even though I'm not a great painter. Anyway, this room right here is the hibernatorium. You can kind of see the little hibernation chambers there. So, alright, then each player will find the corresponding deck of action cards, 10 action cards for each player. You'll shuffle those up and then set them next to your player board here where it says action card deck. Alright, then each player will find their starting item, so captain's starting item, and you'll place it in either your left or right hand, and you put the number of ammunition that it holds. So this one holds 6 ammo, so you take 6 of these ammo markers and place them on the card. The mechanic here has this energy weapon sawed-off shotgun with 2 ammo, and the soldier has the assault rifle with 5 ammo. And then each player will take their 2 quest items, place them somewhere near your board, horizontally like this, that means they're not active at the time. They're not items you actually have at the time. But if you do whatever's required here, discard tools or duct tape, and spend an action, then you can activate this item, and then it becomes an item that you actually have. And then you'd flip it over and maybe put it in your item card holder. But each player starts with 2 quest items. I don't have a, they're supposed to put them near your board. I don't have a lot of room, so I'm going to put them on my board for each character. And so got that done. Player 1 gets the first player token, which is this space cat. I guess it's supposed to be like Jonesy. Maybe it's Wonesy, since you can't say the characters from Alien. Anyway, first player will get that token. And finally, you take the blue corpse token and place it in the hibernatorium, and that represents one of your crewmates that has apparently already been killed by the intruders before everyone else woke up. And that is it. The game is set up. So it takes up quite a bit of space, as you can see. But now we're ready to play. Alright, well, these little help cards that, besides telling you your player number at the start of the game, they also have kind of a little player aid, which I guess is why they're called help card. You'll see the game's played in 2 phases, player phase and event phase. So you see the first thing we do in the player phase is draw 5 of our action cards. So each player will do that all at the same time, so you'll just draw your top 5 action cards. If you ever have to draw a card from your action deck and it's empty or you don't have enough, your discards will be over here. You just shuffle up your discards and form a new draw deck. But anyway, let me draw 5 cards for each of my players. Then after each player's drawn their 5 cards, you move the first player token to the next player. But you don't do that on the first round of the game, so first round of the game, the first player's token will stick with player 1, so they'll be first. Alright, then as you see, you'll perform actions, 2 actions for each player, until each player is passed. So what will happen is, player 1 will take 2 actions, then player 2 will take 2 actions, then player 3 will take 2 actions, then player 1 can take another 2 actions, then player 2, and so on until a player decides to pass. They can take 1 action and pass, or just decide not to take any actions when it comes back around to them and pass. And then when you pass, you just take your help card and flip it over to show that you've passed. The other players can continue taking actions until they pass. And then once everybody's passed, then the player phase is over, and then you go on to the event phase, and that kind of says that here: perform actions, repeat steps until all players have passed. So what actions can you take? Well, if you look at each player board, it has your basic actions, which are movement, shoot, melee attack, pick up a heavy object, trade, or craft an item, or careful movement. This number right here is the cost to take the action, and the cost is one of your cards. So anytime you take an action, if you take a basic action, you've got to discard 1 card from your hand. If you take careful movement, you've got to discard 2 cards from your hand. So those are the basic actions, and we'll go over those shortly. Also, your action cards provide actions, so you can look at what the card is, like this rest card, scan your contamination cards, blah blah. But anyway, that's the cost to do this. So it's nothing other than play the card, go in your discard pile, and then you can take the action shown here on your card. And again, you have 5 cards in your hand to start. The rooms, which right now they're all unexplored, but the rooms in the ship also all provide actions. And there's a few of these sheets that come with the game that they describe all the, the room number ones or the basic room. Sorry about that reflection. But it describes the actions you can take in each of those rooms. Just for instance, the armory for a cost of 2. So in other words, you have to discard 2 of your cards from your hand. Then you can recharge your energy weapon, add 2 ammo tokens to one of your energy weapons. So each room and its action is described here. Those are the basic rooms. And then you remember we had a few number 2 rooms, which are these additional rooms, and you don't know which ones for sure you have until you explore them. But anyway, I'm just going to mention that those sheets, there's a couple of these sheets, as well as the rule book has what each of those rooms are. And you'll see when we flip these rooms over that they do have a short little description of what their actions are. Other actions you can do, as you remember, each player has a quest item that have an action, so you could discard tools or duct tape, which is items you can get from searching, and spend 1 action card to then activate this item. And then, as I spoke about earlier, then you could turn this over and it actually becomes an item in your inventory. And some items that you get up here have actions on them. For instance, this one, fire extinguisher. So for 1 action, you can discard a fire marker from a room, or use 1 intruder in the room. Use on 1 intruder in the room you're in. So this would be an action you could do. It costs 1 action card. You'd have to discard 1 card from your hand, and then this is 1 use only. So after you use it, this item would go into the discard pile. So let's talk about these basic actions. The first one, and probably the most common, is going to be movement. So the basic actions cost 1. So for 1 action, you'd have to discard a card from your hand. So put it there, and then you could move. So when a character moves, it can move to a neighboring room, which is one connected by a corridor. Now all the corridors on the ship start as open, but later they can have doors where they're closed, but they all start as open. So you can move to an unexplored room, or later an explored room. But for instance, we'll just say, the captain, he spent a card, he's going to move. So he has to move to a room that's connected. Now in this hibernatorium, this room is connected, this room is connected, this room's connected here, and this room's connected here. So he would pick which one he wants to move to. So we'll just say he wants to move here. Well, when you're moving to an unexplored room, the first thing you'll do is turn the tile over. You can see this is the cabins, and then you'll look at your exploration token. Well, this one shows what you set what the item counter should be set to. So there's 3 possible items in this room. So each room will have one of these arrows, and they have these numbers here. So you rotate till the number 3 is below that arrow, so there's 3 items in that room. Then these exploration tokens will also have some kind of effect here. Now this one is not good. It's a danger, which means if there is an intruder in a neighboring room, in other words, a room connected by a corridor to this room, he would move into the room. And if there's more than one, they would all move into the room. If there's not an intruder in a neighboring room, which there isn't currently, then you have to put a noise marker in each corridor that's connected to this room. So we'll get our noise markers here, and we put a noise marker in each corridor connected to this room. That's not good right off the bat. And then these exploration tokens just get discarded. Now, if there was an intruder in a neighboring room, but he was in combat with another character, in other words, in the same, another character was in the room with him, then he would not move in there with a danger symbol. But if an intruder's in a neighboring room by himself, then he would move in there. And now at this point we can move the captain in here. But now the bad thing is the next thing you have to do is a noise roll when you move in there. And you do that with one of the noise dice. And the bad thing is, this one also has a silence, which is the best thing you can hope for, and he would have to hope for that now. It's also got the danger symbol on it, which wouldn't really affect us right now because you never put more than one noise marker in a quarter, so that really wouldn't put any more, and there's no alien. But the bad thing is, if he gets a 1, 2, 3, or 4, it would put another noise marker, and if you would put a noise marker in a corridor and there already is one, then you have an encounter. So that's pretty much what would happen here, and we'll just explain. So he moved in there, he's got to make a noise roll. Whenever you move into a room that does not contain, whether it's explored or unexplored, if it does not contain another character or intruder, you have to make a noise roll. So he got a 1, so he would have to put a noise marker in corridor 1 here, but there's already one there. So we would have to have an encounter. Now before we do that, I forgot to mention, I said when we got that danger symbol we had to put a noise marker in each corridor. There's also number 4 is a technical corridor here. Technical corridors is basically some like corridors where the aliens travel through, but not most of the crew cannot travel through that, and that space is just represented by this space on the board here, so we should have put a noise marker in there also. So when you have an encounter, the first thing you'll do is remove all the noise markers in adjacent corridors. So then the next thing we do is have to draw a intruder token from the intruder bag. So I'm going to try to shuffle these up and draw me a token out. Let's see what we get. Uh-oh, we got an adult. So we have to place an adult intruder miniature in the room here with our captain. There's I think four of these sculpts for the adults and 4 of a different sculpt where they're kind of standing up for the adults. And in the manual it shows you what miniature matches each type of intruder. So anyway, we got to put an adult in there with our captain. That's not good right off the bat. Next we look at the back of this intruder token that we drew and compare that number to the amount of cards in the player's hand. So we compare the number of cards in the captain's hand. Well, luckily he's got 4. If it's lower than that number, then the alien gets to make an attack, a surprise attack on the captain at that point. But because he has more cards than the number on that token, the alien does not get to attack at this time. Or I better say intruder instead of alien. IP rules and all that. Alright, so the intruder doesn't get to attack the captain at this time. Then this token does not go back in the intruder bag. It just gets set aside with the other intruder tokens that were not used so far. So that's one less adult in the bag at least. And that resolves our encounter at this point. If the captain had less cards, then we would had to have an attack, but we'll talk about that later. So that's what happened there. So the captain and the intruder are said to be in combat because they're in the same room together. Now, I was trying to just go over some basic rules, but we've kind of gone into a whole other bunch of things right now. The first time an intruder appears on the board, it triggers a special phase, or what's called a critical moment. So the first time an intruder appears on the board, all players have to decide to keep only one of their objectives. So they choose one of their objectives, still keep it secret, but the other one is discarded. So from that point forward, they'll only be going for one goal. So, and we'll just say Captain, he's going to discard his corporate objective and stick with his personal objective, which is to finish the game in an escape pod and have 7 items. So the objective you're not going to keep is just discarded. So each player would do that, and they would only have one objective left, and that's the one they're going to try to accomplish so they can hopefully win the game. So we're kind of just trying to show how movement works. So we kind of demonstrated a few rules there. When you move into an unexplored room, you flip it over, flip the exploration token, set the room to the number of items, the item counter, and do anything else that's on the exploration token. And that'll bring us to a good spot here to show our second possible basic action, which is to shoot. And since our captain has taken one action, which was a movement action, he still has another action he could take, which would be he could shoot now since he's in combat with this intruder. So to take a shoot action, it still costs 1 card, so he'll have to discard one of his cards from his hand. So, you know, you choose one, I don't know, he'll just pick this one, put it in his discard. And then he can use any weapon that he's got equipped that's got ammo. So he'll discard 1 ammo from his weapon because he's shooting. Let's see, look at this 6 shooter. It can only be reloaded with the reload. When you roll, let's look at the combat dice real quick. It's got a blank side. It's got a creeper icon, which means you hit a larva or a creeper if you have that. A blank side is a miss. Adult icon means you hit a larva or a creeper or an adult. This double icon means you get 2. You do 2 damage. This guy, if he rolls that, he deals an additional injury. And this one, you just do 1 injury. So he's doing a shoot action against that adult. So he's going to roll. Well, let's roll again. Alright, good. So that would hit, because that's got the adult symbol, that would hit a larva, do 1 damage to a larva, a creeper, or an adult, which he is fighting. So now the adult gets 1 injury. So you just put one of these injury tokens on its base somewhere. And then anytime an intruder takes an injury, you draw an Intruder Attack card, and then you'll only be looking at this blood symbol up in the top left. If the number of injuries is equal to or less than that number, then the intruder is killed. If the number is higher than the number of injuries, then the intruder is not killed. So in this case, he's only got 1 injury. If he had 2, he would have been killed, 2 or more, but he's only got 1, so he's still alive. And then this card is just discarded. If you're shooting a larva or an egg intruder, they just take 1 hit and they're killed. You don't even have to draw a card. If you get a successful hit, they're destroyed. If you are shooting at a breeder or the queen, you actually draw 2 Intruder Attack cards and total the 2 blood tokens in the left-hand corner, and you have to have at least that much damage on them in order for them to be killed. So obviously it's a lot harder to kill the queen or a breeder than it is to just kill an adult or a creeper or a larva or an egg. The next basic action is the melee attack. So if you didn't have a weapon or your weapon was out of ammunition, you could do a melee attack. So melee attacks are a lot more dangerous for you. So if you roll a miss on a melee attack, you take a serious wound. If you roll this, if you're attacking a larva or a creeper, then you get a hit. but if you're attacking anything else, then it's a miss and you get a serious wound. Same for the adult symbol. If you're attacking a larva, a creeper, or an adult, and you get this, then you get 1 injury to the creature. If it's anything else, then you take a serious wound. And then if you roll this, you do 1 injury to whatever you're fighting. And if you roll this, you still only do 1 injury to whatever you're fighting. So I guess it's a good time to talk about serious wounds, since we talked about if you did a melee attack and you miss, you get a serious wound. So whenever you get a serious wound, you have to draw a serious wound card, and it'll have some ongoing effect. You keep that card in your play area. For instance, this one, each time you pass in the player phase, your character suffers 1 light wound, which we'll talk about those just in a second. But so that would be an ongoing effect, and you would keep that in your play area. You can have up to 3 serious wounds normally. If you would ever take a 4th serious wound, then you're or if you have 3 if you have 3 serious wounds and you take any other wound, a light wound or serious wound, then your player is killed. Although there are some cards where even if you just have 2 serious wounds, it'll say if this is your 3rd serious wound, or if you already have 2 serious wounds, then you're killed. So it's possible to die with less than 3 serious wounds, but if you do have 3 serious wounds and you take any other wound, light wound or serious, then that will kill you. If you ever suffer a light wound, you just take a status marker and put it on the first space of your light wound track there. If you take another light wound, you just move it down. If you take a 3rd light wound, you would move it here, remove it, and take a serious wound card. And if you ever do get killed, you remove your miniature from the map, you place one of these corpse tokens where you died. If you had any heavy objects, not heavy items, but any heavy objects. Objects are physical components like a corpse token or intruder corpse token or an egg. Those are heavy objects. There are heavy items like a weapon. If an item has this like carrying it by a handle icon, it's a heavy item. But when you're killed, heavy items don't drop in your space. They just get discarded, to whatever discard pile they come from, or a card pile they came from, into the discard pile. But heavy objects like a corpse token or something actually drop in your space, and then you're just out of the game. There is an optional rule where the first person killed can actually start playing as the intruder. I'm not going to go over that optional rule. I didn't play with that yesterday when I was playing by myself. So anyway. Alright, we've talked about basic actions: movement, shoot, melee attack. Let's talk about pick up a heavy object. So as I mentioned a minute ago, a heavy object is either an intruder corpse, which is one of these tokens, or a player corpse, character corpse, or an egg token. So for one action, you can pick up a heavy object, so you'd have to discard a card, because again, it costs 1 action. And then you could pick up one of these heavy objects, and you just put it on your player board or something to show that you have it. And actually, that's not true. A heavy item or a heavy object have to go in one of your hands, so you can only carry up to 2 heavy items or objects. So like right now, this weapon is 1 heavy item. It's in his right hand, so if he picked this up, it would have to go in his left hand. So you can only carry 2 heavy items. Now if you have 2 and you want to pick up a different one, you can drop a heavy item or a heavy object. If you drop a heavy item, it just goes to the bottom of its draw deck. If you drop a heavy object, which again is the intruder corpse, character corpse, or egg, then it drops in the room you're in. So again, you can only carry 2 heavy items or other items that are not heavy. When you acquire them, they go in your little card tray here. But if it's heavy, if it's an object, or if it has this symbol, then it has to go in one of your hands. Alright, so we talked about pick up a heavy object, and again that does cost an action. Now, well, we'll talk about search in a minute. Alright, so the next basic action is trade. So if somebody does a trade action, and again, costs 1 action card to do a trade action, you could trade with everybody in the room is then allowed to trade items or objects. So not just the player that initiated, that did the trade action. All the players in that room are allowed to trade amongst each other. Again, you can trade items or objects. So, I mean, that's pretty much it for a trade action. Alright, next is craft item. Again, cost 1 action. You got to discard a card to do that. And then you can craft an item. So you can see the items you can craft here. You can craft an antidote, a taser, a flamethrower, and a Molotov cocktail. Now you do that because other items you pick up, like if you've picked up this chemicals items, you'll see it's got a little fire icon up here. Well, you can see if you have an item with a fire icon and one with the plus icon, you could craft an antidote. If you have one with the fire and whatever that's supposed to be, you could craft a flamethrower. But in this case, you know, let's say the captain had these 2 items. He's got clothes and chemicals. Well, he's got this symbol and this symbol, so he could craft, he's got the fire and the cloth, I guess. He could craft a Molotov cocktail. So for 1 action, he could take the craft item, he would discard both of these items, and then from the crafted item deck, he would draw the Molotov cocktail, and then that would go in his item slot. But the 2 items he used to craft it with would get discarded. And then the last basic action we have on the board here is careful movement. You can see that costs you actually 2 cards to perform careful movement. And careful movement is similar to regular movement. It would work exactly the same, only you don't have to roll a noise dice. You get to choose a corridor to place the noise marker in. So you still have to place one, you just don't roll the noise dice. You may want to do that if maybe 2 of the corridors already had noise tokens in them. You don't want to roll the noise dice and possibly risk having to put a noise token in one of those corridors. So you could do a careful movement for a 2 action cost, and then you could choose where you're placing your noise marker. If all the corridors in a room already have a noise marker, you can't do a careful movement action. Also, if you're in combat, you can't do you're in there with an intruder, you can't do a you can't do a careful movement action, and you really can't even do a normal movement action. If you want to move out of there, you have to do what's called an escape. And to escape, it's going to be similar just to any other move action. In other words, if you're going to move into an unexplored room, you'll have to flip it over, do the tile. You have to make a noise roll. I mean, even if you're moving into an explored room, you still got to make a noise roll, unless there's another character or intruder in the room you're moving into. But before you can move, when you're doing an escape, each intruder in that room gets to make an attack against you. So this is a good time to talk about intruder attacks. So if you were trying to escape out of that room, that each intruder, which there's just one in there now, gets to make an intruder attack. So whenever an intruder is making an attack, they draw an intruder attack card. Then if the symbol of the intruder in there is on this line, which in this case we have an adult and the adult symbol is there, then they get to do an attack. So in this case, it's a slime, so your character gets a slime marker and 1 contamination card. So when you get a slime, you take one of these status markers and just put it on this slime box, and that can have, detrimental effects later in the game. And you also get a contamination card, so you draw a contamination card and place that face up in your discard pile. Now, the back of these contamination cards look just like an action card, so they'll end up kind of clogging up your hand as you get more of them. And then obviously then you'll have less possible actions you can do, because you can't discard a contamination card to take an action. Now, I didn't mention this, but when you pass on your turn, you can discard any number of cards that are still in your hand if you want to. So at the beginning of the next player phase, you can draw back up to 5. So you can discard contamination cards into your discard pile when you pass, but you can't play them to discard to take actions. And also, that could lead to you being infected and having a little, what are they called, little larva or whatever inside you, and possibly death. But we'll talk about that later. Let's talk a little bit more about some of these card actions. If you're playing a action from a card, if it has this symbol up here, that means you can't play it if you're in combat. In other words, if you're in a room with an intruder, you cannot play this card for its action. And some of them require you to be in combat. Now, I don't have any here, but there's some that do have a symbol. Well, actually, like your weapon, it has that symbol, which means you have to be in combat to use it. So, and if you were going to play this card for its action, you could play it for basic repairs. Discard a malfunction marker from a room you're in, which we haven't talked about malfunction markers. That's maybe a good time to do it right now. These are a malfunction marker. There's some exploration tokens or possibly some other effects that may put a malfunction marker into a room. When there's a malfunction marker in a room, then that room's action is not capable of being taken. Now, here in the cabins there is no action, but let's find a room here. Let's just look at what's this one. Well, that's the nest. That's not good. That's not a good example. Let's see here. Gosh, having trouble finding a good example. I guess I'll just use this one. All right, Airlock Control. So when you're in this room, one possible action you could do for a cost of 2 action cards is start emergency depressurization, which that action has a long explanation, which I'm not going to go over right now. Again, you can read those on the sheet that shows the rules for each action for a room. But what I'm going over here is the malfunction token. If it has a malfunction token, you can't take that action. Also, there's only 8 malfunction tokens. If you ever go to place a 9th malfunction token, if you're told to place a malfunction token and you don't have any to draw from, then the ship is destroyed and everyone on it, intruders and characters, are killed. And that's similar for fire tokens. You can have effects that, events or effects that cause a fire token to be placed in a room. If you ever end your turn in a room then that has a fire token, then you take 1 light wound. Now, you can move into the room with a fire token, say, because you get 2 actions, so if you move in there with one of your actions, but then move out with your second action, then you don't take a wound. But if you end your turn, your second action in a room with a fire token, then you take a light wound. But as I was saying, like malfunction tokens, there's only 8 fire tokens. If you ever are told to place a fire token and you don't have one to place, then the ship explodes and everybody on the ship is killed. But we were talking about this basic repairs. Now, if you were going to take this action, basic repairs, you have to spend this card plus 2 additional cards to take that action. So the action cost is 2. So you're playing the card plus you got to play 2 cards. So it would be a total of 3 cards out of your hand to play this. But what that does is you discard a malfunction marker from a room you were in. So if you were in here, you could then discard that malfunction marker because you repaired it. Then it would go back into the pool of available malfunction markers. Or also with this one, you could break or repair an engine in the engine. So if you were in the engine room and you wanted to repair it, in other words, move the working side to the top, you could do that. Or you could move the damaged side to the top. The other players won't know what you did because they don't know if you're trying to do good or do bad. Because your goal may be that you want, the ship to not make it to Earth, so you want your engines to not be functional. But anyway, that's one of the things you could do with this card. I wanted to talk about searching. I know that notice that the soldier here had one of his 5 action cards he drew was a search. So if you're going to play the search action, it has no additional cost, so you would discard the card. But you can see you reduce the item counter by 1 in the room you're in. So he's in this room. It has 3 possible items. He would reduce it by 1, so he would move it down to 2. So now you know there's 2 possible items in there. Then you draw 2 items of the same color as the room you're in. Now, this room is white, so actually you can draw from the yellow, green, or red item piles. But if you were in a room like this one we looked at over here, where it's yellow, if you search this room, you have to draw from the yellow item pile. If you're in a room that's red, you got to draw from the red item pile, and if you're in a room that is green up here, then you got to draw from the green item pile. But when it's white, you can choose any of the piles that you want to draw from. So you can see you draw 2 cards of the same color, or if you're in a white, whichever color you want, pick one and discard the other to the bottom of its deck. So let's just say, since he's a soldier, he wants to draw from this pile here. And then he would look at him, see what he got. An evacuation key or a self-destruct key. Anyway, he could keep one, and it would go in your item holder here. So the other players would know you have one red item, but they wouldn't know what it is. And the other one, it doesn't go in the item discard pile. It goes to the bottom. Goes to the bottom of the deck. If you use an item and spend it, then it gets discarded. But when you're just like that, drawing 2 and putting 1 back, it goes to the bottom. And then you'd see this is an item that has an action you could take if you're not in combat. It cost you 1. You'd have to pay 1 card to take this action. If you're in an evacuation section room, lock or unlock one of the escape pods in the evacuation section. So that's what that one does. Alright, so we've covered all the basic actions and also showed how some of the cards or items have other actions that you can take. So again, during the player phase, each player will take up to 2 actions, then it's the next player's turn, the next player, till finally each player has passed, and then you'll go to the next phase, which is the event phase. Let's talk about that. So you'll see in the event phase, the first thing you'll do is move the time track. So that's this track right here. You'll move the marker along to the next space down. One of the game ending conditions is when the time track reaches the end down here. If you have a marker on the self-destruct self-destruct track, you would also move that at this time. Of course, currently there is no marker. There are certain conditions that may initiate the self-destruct sequence, but right now there's none, so we wouldn't move it. But if there was one, you'd move it at this time. Alright, the next thing you do in the event phase is the Intruder Attack. So in any room where there is an intruder in combat with a player, each intruder would get to make an attack. So again, if we got to this part of the phase and there's an intruder, each intruder would get to make an attack against a character they're in a room with. So we've talked about that already. You draw an Intruder Attack card. If it's got a symbol that matches the intruder that's in the room with you, then you do whatever, we'll just draw the next one here. This one would work because it's an adult in there and there is an adult symbol here, so then you would follow whatever it says here. The character suffers 1 light wound and gets a contamination card. And remember, whenever you get a contamination card, it goes in your discard pile. And that would happen for every intruder that was on the board in combat or in the same room with a character. Alright, next you got the fire damage. So in the fire damage step, every room where there's an intruder in the same room as a fire token, that intruder takes 1 injury. So then you take, in this case, you'd put 1 injury token on them. And then, of course, because he took an injury, you'd have to draw an Intruder Attack card and look at the number and make sure he doesn't have a number of injuries equal to or greater than that number. If he did, he would be killed. And again, remember, an egg or a larva, they only take 1 injury to kill them. So if they were in a room with a fire during this phase, they would be killed. And I know I talked a little bit about fire already, but and malfunction tokens, if you're ever, they can each only hold 1, so a room can only have 1 fire token or 1 malfunction token in it. If you're ever would an effect would have you put a fire token or a malfunction token in a room that already has one, you just wouldn't put it in there. Alright, after you resolve fire damage for any intruders that are in a room with the fire, you resolve an event card. So for that, first thing you do is draw an event card off the top of the deck, and you'll look up here, and any intruders that match those symbols would move along that corridor. If they're not in a room, if they're in a room with a character, so in combat, they would not move. But if they're not in combat, so in this case, all adults would move along the number 2 corridor. So if this adult was in here, he's not in there with a character, he would move along the number 2 corridor, so he would move into this room here. Also, if there was a breeder, then he would move along number 2 corridor. Any other type of intruders would not move. Then you resolve the event text down here. So here you'd place a malfunction marker in the explored room with the lowest number. So to place a marker in the explored room with the lowest room number, the room numbers, I guess, are these light numbers next to these rooms. So anyway, that's what you would do. So anyway, that's what you do in the event. First you move the intruders if they're not in a room with somebody in combat, and then you do the event text. Then finally you do the Intruder Bag Development. So that just means you'll draw a token from the intruder bag, and then depending on what it is, if it's a larva like this, then you'll remove that from the bag and replace an adult into the bag. If you draw out a creeper, you'll put that out and replace that with a breeder token. I'm trying to find those. Oh, here we go. you'd replace it with a breeder token back in the bag. If you pull out an adult, then all characters have to roll for noise in the room that they're in. If you're already in a room with a intruder, you don't have to roll for noise, and then this intruder, this adult token goes back in the bag. And if you pull out a breeder token, it's the same. All characters have to roll for noise. If you're in the room with an intruder, then you don't have to roll for noise, and then this token goes back in the bag. And when the characters are rolling for noise, they do that in turn order. They'll do that in turn order. If you pull out the queen token and there are any characters in the nest room, then you will put the queen in the nest room and resolve an encounter immediately. If there are no characters in the nest room, or if the nest room hasn't been discovered yet, you put the queen token back in the bag and you add an egg to the nest. And if you pull out the blank token, then you just add an adult token and the blank token back to the bag. And that's the last thing in the event phase. So then at that point you go back to the player phase. All players draw back up to 5 cards into their hand, and then you advance the first player token. So let's talk about winning the game, and then go over a few things we didn't cover. So winning the game, like we already mentioned, you want to fulfill whichever goal you have and survive. So like for this goal, you want to finish the game in the escape pod and have 7 items in your item thing. You may have a goal where the ship returns to Earth. Now you can get back in the hibernatorium and hibernate, but if the ship ends up getting destroyed on the way, then you don't survive, and so you don't win the game. So you got to meet your goal and you got to survive in order to win. Now there can be multiple winners, or there can be no winners. So you do the victory check at certain times. So we talked about if the time marker reaches it down here, it's going to make a hyperspace jump. When it reaches there, any character still on board the ship must be in the hibernatorium hibernating, or they die from the G-forces when the ship makes its hyper jump, or whatever it's called. Hyperspace jump. Alright, so that's one way the game will come to an end. The other way is if the self-destruct marker reaches this point, or if, like we talked about, you have to place a 9th fire marker or a 9th malfunction marker. All of those will cause the ship to explode, and anybody still on board the ship at that time will be destroyed, killed. And that includes intruders and the nest. Says it may be important for some objectives that the nest is destroyed. So that's one possible way to do it, is for the ship to blow up. Of course, at that point, the only way for you to still be alive is if you escaped in an escape pod. And then the other way the game can end is when the last character that's still on the ship, that's not already hibernating, either hibernates or escapes in an escape pod, or they die. And then there's nobody left to take any actions on the ship, and that's another way for the game to end, and then check the goals to see who won. So if you get to the end of the game because you've reached the hyperspace jump, or because the last character hibernates or escapes and the ship hasn't been destroyed, then the first thing you'll do is check the status of the engines. If at least 2 of the engines are not functioning, then the ship is destroyed and everybody on board it dies. If you have at least 2 working engines, then the next thing you'll check is the coordinates card and make sure and then check the destination track and make sure you're headed toward Earth. Like in this case, you would not be, so the ship would be, just everybody on board the ship would die. The destination track would have to be set to A, then you're headed toward Earth, and then it would make it safely, and people on board the ship hibernating would live. I think there is one objective where if it's headed to Mars, whoever has that objective, they would survive, but the other players would not. Next, if you're lucky enough that the coordinates are headed to Earth and you're survived in the hibernation chamber, or if you've escaped in an escape pod, the next thing you'll do is scan all contamination cards that you have in your hand, discard pile, any contamination cards you have. You'll scan them in the scanner. You do that by sticking the contamination card in there, and then I find it very hard to read, and you probably can't read it on this camera, but if any line in there says infected, there'll be several lines and some of them are just gibberish, but if one of them says infected, or if you already have a larva on your player board, then you've got to do this following steps. You got to take your 10 action cards and any contamination cards you have, shuffle them all up, and then deal the top 4. If any of the top 4 you reveal is a contamination card, then you die. So finally then, if you survive and you show your objective card and you've met your objective, then you are the winner or one of the possible winners of the game. Otherwise, you lose. If any character uses an escape pod or hibernates or dies, then they are out of the game, waiting for the end of the game while the other players continue their turns aboard the ship. So they won't take any actions, except for, like I mentioned, there is a variant where if you're the first character to die, you can start playing during intruder turns as an intruder. A couple of other things to mention on this time track. Once the time marker reaches here, then the hibernation chambers are open, and then it's possible for characters to go on and go into hibernation. If the self-destruct track is moving and it reaches this space, then all the escape pods automatically unlock at that point. There are ways to unlock them before that, but they will all unlock at that point, and once it reaches that point, there's no longer any way to stop the self-destruct sequence. One of the other ways all the escape pods will unlock, you can't enter them when they're locked, so again, you have to unlock them or wait for them to unlock if you're going to escape in one. One of the ways that you can escape an escape pod is one of the other critical moments. I mentioned one critical moment is the first time an intruder appears on the board, then you have to pick your one goal. As soon as the first character dies, then that's another critical moment, and all the escape pods will unlock at that point. And one thing we didn't talk about is the intruder weaknesses on the intruder board. So you'll notice above each intruder weakness card you've got character corpse, intruder egg, or intruder carcass. So at some point one of these tiles is going to be a laboratory tile, and if you ever take one of those items, a character corpse, remember one starts on the board, but there's other ones when characters die, or if you get an intruder egg from the nest or another means, or if you anytime an intruder is killed, an intruder carcass token is placed where it died. So if you ever pick up one of those heavy objects and carry it to the laboratory and perform the laboratory's action, which is to analyze whichever object you bring in there, then you get to reveal the corresponding weakness. So if you took an intruder carcass to the laboratory and did the laboratory action, then you can reveal this intruder weakness card for intruder carcass. And it'll talk about vulnerability to energy. So from that point forward, any energy weapon attack that deals at least one injury deals an additional injury. So they're just ways to do, help you do a little more harm to the intruders. We didn't talk about door tokens, but if you ever close a door in a corridor, that prevents characters and intruders from moving through that corridor. Now, if something would ever cause an intruder to try to move through a closed door, it wouldn't move. It wouldn't get to move at that point. So, say maybe noise happened and an intruder would move from here into this room. Well, it's got a closed door, so he couldn't make it in there. But then instead of moving, he would destroy that door. Then the next time he needed to move, he would be able to move through that corridor. And because that door is destroyed, it can never be closed again. And there are various cards and items or whatever that allow you to open and close doors. Well, I think we've covered the basics. I mean, there's obviously some things I didn't go over here, but this video is already getting pretty long. So I think we'll do a couple of player turns just to kind of again go over how things play. Like I said, I mean, I didn't cover every possible thing. My video would probably go on another 20 minutes if I 20 or 30 minutes if I were to do that, but I covered most of the basic actions and what you want to do to win. And anyway, let's get started with a couple of example turns. Alright, let's start with a couple of example turns. So I've kind of set everything back up how we were at the beginning. Of course, first thing is everybody draws 5 cards, and then since it's the first turn of the game, we won't pass the first player marker. So captain's player 1. Well, I didn't set this back. Captain is player 1. So he's got to decide what he wants to do. And he wants to, probably complete one of his goals. So this one, he's got to get a lot of items. So I think he's going to move around and try to search. So for his first turn, or his first action, he's going to move. That costs 1 card, so he'll pay with this order card, and he's going to move. I kind of rearranged some of these, but let's go this way just because we went that guy. No, we're going to go this way like we did before, but like I said, I think I rearranged these tiles. Maybe not this one. Anyway, so he's going to move in here, and we got 3. So we got to set the item counter to 3, and then he gets a slime status marker. So let's get a status marker, put that on the slime. Alright, now we discard this, go ahead and move the captain there, and then we got to make a noise roll. Alright, let's make our noise roll 2, so we got to put a noise marker on corridor 2, which is right there. Alright, that's his first action. Now we can see he's in the control room, and it has a computer, and in the engine control room. So he could discard 2 cards if he wanted to check the status of the engines, and to do that you just look at the top tile of each engine so you know if it's working or not working. But that's going to cost me 2 of my cards. I don't really want to do that. Let's see if I have a search card. Got basic repairs, reload, rest, and interruption. So nothing to search. So let's move again. Alright, he's going to take another movement action. That's going to cost another card, so he'll discard this one. And he's going to move into this room. So let's flip it over. We got 4 items in there. That's good. And what do we got? Oh, a malfunction marker. So this room is malfunctioning. So even if we wanted to use the surgery, we couldn't do that right now. And we discard this token. Move the captain in there. Then we got to make our noise roll. We got a 2 again. And then 2 from this corridor is going over, or from this room is going over here. If the surgery wasn't malfunctioning and somebody wants to use it, it allows you to scan your contamination cards and remove any infected cards, and then I think you have to get a, a light wound and pass after doing that. But if it comes to somebody using it, well, we'll double check for sure. But anyway, that's both the captain's actions. So now we go on to the soldier, and they get their 2 actions. Now the soldier's goals, he's got the ship must reach Earth, or his character is the only survivor, and to find the intruder egg weakness. So he kind of wants to find the nest, and he wants to make sure the ship, if he wants to do this one, is doing good. So he may want to go check the status of the engines so he makes sure that we reach Earth. So I think that's what he's going to do. So he's going to spend 1 card, to do a basic action. He'll spend this interruption card to do a movement, basic movement action. So he'll spend that 1 card, and then he's going to move into this room. He does have to make a noise roll because nobody was in there. That's a little bit dangerous because if he rolls a 2, he'll be in a little bit of a pickle. And he got a 1, so that works out okay. So we got to put a noise marker on there, and that's the end of his first action. So for his second action, he wants to use this engine control room to check the status of the engine. So that costs 2, so he's going to spend these 2 cards, discard them over here, and then he gets to look at the top tile of each engine. Of course, he doesn't have to tell the truth about what he sees to the other players, but since I'm all the other players, it doesn't matter. Uh-oh, that engine's not working. That one is working. Remember, you have to have at least 2 of them working to... Yeah, so we're alright. As long as 2 of them are working, the ship can successfully jump. Alright, well that's both of the soldiers' actions. So now we move on to the mechanic. So the mechanic's objectives are kind of similar to that of the soldier. They want the ship to reach Earth, or be the only character to survive, and find at least 2 intruder weaknesses. So let's see what he wants to do. Well, I think the mechanic, he's going to go ahead and move in here, the control room. So that's going to cost him a card. You don't want to waste a search on that. Let's see. He'll spend his computer skills card. And then he's going to move in here. Now, because there's somebody's in there, he does not have to make a noise roll. If a character or an intruder is in a room you move into, you don't have to make a noise roll. Now, the mechanic has a search card, so that won't cost him anything, so I think he's going to play that. So he reduces the item counter down to a 2. And then he gets to draw 2 yellow item cards and pick one and discard the other to the bottom of its deck. So he'll draw 1, 2. So he got fire extinguisher and chemicals. Now this one could be used in crafting. This is a heavy item, so he would have to keep it in his hand. But if a fire starts, that would be good. I think he's going to keep this fire extinguisher. So since that's a heavy item, he's got to put it in his left hand. He's got his sawed-off shotgun in his right hand. and then this one gets discarded to the bottom of this pile. And that's going to be both of his actions. Alright, we're back to the captain. Guess he wants to keep exploring, so he's going to move into this first engine room. So he's just going to spend a card to move, and he'll move in here. He's got to make a noise roll. He got a 2. He keeps rolling a 2. And that comes over here. That's in the technical corridor, so we'd put that up in here. So in the engine room, he could check the status of the engine for for 2 cards. He could spend that, and you can see that it doesn't show that on here, but if you look at this sheet or in the rules for special rooms, engine number 1, you can check the engine status in this room, but you would only check the status of that one engine, and the action cost is 2. Or if you have a repair or tools item card, you could repair or break the engine. And the same thing for engine room 2 or 3 if you're in their room. So I think that's what he's going to do, because he may have asked the soldier what the status of the engines were, but he's not sure if he trusts them. So he's going to spend his last 2 cards to check the status of the engine. So he's going to look at it himself and say, oh, that's damaged. Alright, maybe I like that, maybe I don't. Since he wants to escape in an escape pod possibly, and make sure player 3 doesn't survive, he probably wants the engines to not be working, so he thinks that's pretty good. Alright, well that's both the captain's actions, so now we're back to the soldier, and we see what he wants to do. He probably wants to search, so his first action, he's going to spend one of his search cards. And there's still 2 items here, so he's going to search. He'll reduce that to 1. And then he gets to draw 2 item cards. Yellow, because that's the color of that room. And he's got a close or a duct tape. And he's got this quest item that if he discards tools or duct tapes, he can activate that. So he's going to take the duct tape. So he'll take that. Now that's not a heavy item, so he puts it in his little item card holder, and then this one gets discarded to the bottom of the pile. Well, he still has one more search card, so there's one more item in there, so he's going to search again with his last card. That will put this down to 0 items, and he'll search that deck again. And now he got fire extinguisher or chemicals. He's going to take the fire extinguisher also, just like the mechanic did. So again, that's a heavy item. It's going to go in his left hand, and then we'll discard that other one. Alright, well, that's the end of the soldier's turn. We're back to the mechanic. She has a search card, but now there's 0 items in there, so... Or, I say she, I don't know. Is it a she or a he? I can't really tell. Anyway, so... What do I got? Search, rest, and ingenuity. Ingenuity allows me to discard a malfunction marker, and because I want the ship to survive, I think what I'm going to do is move over here into this room and discard that malfunction marker. So first I got to move. So I'm going to spend my rest card to move. And I'm going to move into this room, and because there's nobody in there, I got to make a noise roll. I'm going to roll again because it went off the board. I got a 1. Uh-oh. Well, there's already a noise marker there. So that means we have to have an encounter. So first thing, we discard any noise markers in corridors connected to this room. There's just the 1. Then we have to draw an intruder token from the bag. Let's hope for a blank. And we got, oh crap, queen. Alright, so we got to put the queen in the room with us. She's pretty dang big. Then we got to compare the number on the back, which is 4, to the number of cards in our hand, which is only 2. So we're lower. So that's going to cause a surprise attack. This token will get set aside. It's possible it could come back, but oh well, at least the queen's not in the bag anymore. Bad part is she's out in the ship about to damage us. So anyway, now we got to do a surprise attack, so we got to draw an Intruder Attack card. It does have the queen symbol, bite, so if the character has 2 serious wounds, they die. He or she doesn't have any yet. If not, they suffer 1 serious wound. So discard that. We'll draw a serious wound card for the mechanic. And they got bit in the body. You draw up to 4 action cards instead of 5. So that's no good. I kind of add a room here. We'll just set it here, I guess. Alright, well, the mechanic was going in there to try to repair the surgery room, but now there's a big queen intruder in there, so I think they're going to do a shoot action. So they're going to discard their ingenuity card to do a shoot action. They have to discard 1 ammo. And let's see what their sawed-off shotgun. Unmodified roll of a single hit is treated as a double hit. Alright, let's roll our combat die. Oh, double hit. Well, that's good. 2 damage. Let me see how I can stick them on this model. Hold on. Alright, kind of stuck the 2 damage right there. Now we got to draw an Intruder Attack card. Well, 2 because it's the queen. So we would actually need 8 damage on her to kill her, but we've only got 2, so she's still alive. Alright, well that ends the mechanic's turn, so now we're back to the captain. Captain has no cards left, so captain's just going to pass, so he'll flip his thing to pass. Come back to the soldier over here. He's got no cards left either, so he's going to pass. Oh, and I forgot, because we had our first critical moment, our first encounter, everybody's got to discard down to their 1 objective, so the soldier's just going to keep his discover intruder egg weakness. He thinks he can probably solve that, so he's going to discard this other one. Let's see, the captain, he's going to try to finish in an escape pod, so he's going to discard his corporate objective, and the mechanic, he'll keep his at least true intruder weaknesses, so he'll discard his personal objective also. And the mechanic still has 1 card, so I think they're not going to pass yet. They're going to take a shoot action. Spend that 1 card to take a shoot action. That's going to take their last ammo, unfortunately. So let's hope for something good. Oh, you got to be kidding me. That's a miss. Alright, well, we come back to the captain who already passed, so they can't do anything. We come back to the soldiers who already passed, so they can't do anything. Oh, well, actually, I forgot. The mechanic still had another action, but they didn't have any other cards, so for their second action, they're going to pass. Alright, so now everybody's passed, so that's going to end the player phase. Alright, so first thing in the event phase, which we've moved on to, is to advance the time track down 1. If there was anything on the self-destruct, we would move that, but there's not. Now we perform Intruder Attack. So any intruder in the combat with the player would attack. So the only one we have is the queen. So let's see what she does. Another bite. Boy, maybe I didn't shuffle these cards. So poor mechanic suffers his second serious wound. So let's see what they got now. Bit in the leg. Cost of your escape movement action is 2, so if he or she wanted to escape out of that room, they have to spend 2 cards instead of just 1. That's that. Next is fire damage. If there was an intruder in a room with fire, the intruder would take a damage. At this point, we don't have any fire in the ship. Alright, next thing we do is resolve an event card. Now, first we would do Intruder Movement, and because the queen is on here, she would normally move, but because she's in a room in combat, she does not move. But if she wasn't, she would move along corridor 2 to that room. But anyway, she doesn't move, so then we go on to the event, which is life support failure. That doesn't sound good. Place a malfunction marker in each explored green room. Well, we don't have any explored green. Oh, yes, we do. And it already has a malfunction marker, so we don't place it right here in the surgery, but it's already got one. Remove this event from the game and reshuffle the events deck, including the discard pile. Well, there's no discard pile, so I'm not even going to bother reshuffling it, but I will remove this from the game. Alright, next we do Intruder Bag Development. So we draw 1 token from the bag. See what we get. We got an adult. So with that result, all characters roll for noise unless they're in combat, so the mechanic will not roll for noise. But we'll start with the captain. He'll roll for noise. He got a 2. Man, he is always rolling a 2. Oh. And that's the technical corridor, and there's already a noise in there, so you know what that means. So we have to have an encounter. First we remove all noise markers connected to this room. That will include this one in the technical corridor, but now we have to have an encounter in this room. So we got to draw a token from the bag. We got an adult, so we got to pull. Now this is the one we pulled out for still doing our event phase. This is the one we just pulled out. So that's going to put an adult in here. And we have to look at the back of that. 4. And the captain has no cards, so that's going to be a surprise attack on the captain. And this token will go out. Could come in later, but we got to do our surprise attack on the captain. He got, it's an adult, so it does trigger. He gets a bite, so he gets a serious wound. Man, I must not have shuffled those good. We're getting nothing but bites. So the captain, he gets bleeding. Each time when you pass in the player phase, your character suffers 1 light wound. And we're still in that event phase, so he got that whole attack happen because he rolled for noise. The soldier still has to roll for noise. And he got a 3, which that's safe for him because there's no noise in that corridor. And then this token, which we drew for that Intruder Bag Development, actually goes back into the bag. And that ends our first round with us in not very good shape. Mechanics nigh on the verge of dying. The captain's in battle for his life, already taken a serious wound. The only one in good shape is the soldier. So of course we would start the next round by drawing back up to 5 cards. So the captain would draw his. And then he'd pass the first player token on over to the soldier. The soldier would draw his back up to 5 cards, which is all of them. And remember, the mechanic can only draw up to 4 cards. because of that bite. And then we would start the next round. But I think this video is way too long already, so I'm going to end it right there with one example round. Hopefully it gives you a good idea how to play. Again, like I said, I know I skipped some things or didn't get around to explaining some things, but we covered you know, the basics. And if you're going to play the game, you know, you can just look up the rules for the different rooms or whatever and some of the other stuff. But I think this gives you a good idea of how the game plays. And there's some other much better videos that teach you how to play this game out there. So and they're much shorter, so you may want to check out those. But anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it.